I do have the questions from the class, which are actually great because for one, very insightful, two, a very broad spectrum of approaches of questions. And I'd like to focus my time around that, especially now with a little bit of the time lost. I want to really jump into and make sure I address some of the questions, which will actually be very comprehensive in our time together as well. Okay, the steel pan, the steel drum, pan, all of the same terms, all the same referencing this instrument or this family of instruments developed out of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to spend a little bit of time maybe reviewing and sampling some of the instruments. And then I want to also make sure I talk about some of the factors and lifestyle and situation that created the context for this instrument to be birthed, which was kind of like the story of the phoenix, you know, like ashes and, you know, burn yourself into ashes and rise up out of the ashes and from nothing to something. It's kind of the story of steel pan. I'm kind of talking and trying to play catch up with some of my resources. So here we go, as I'm pulling some things up on the computer. So the steel pan is a family of instruments. And just like other instruments you may have encountered maybe through high school band or rock and roll or any other type of genres you've listened to, the same musical concepts that have created all other Western European instruments are the same concepts that were used to develop the steel pan instrument. Steel pan has a very kind of dark origins that really created, that were the basis of creating the instruments we know and love today. You know, oftentimes we hear steel pan and it's, oh, you know, that was fun and I like hearing that. And that reminds me of when we went to Jamaica on a family vacation. And that reminds me when I went on a cruise on our honeymoon when we got married, and that's so much fun, and it's just a party, and it's on the beach, and it's sunny, and it's great, and all that, which is true. That is an aspect of when steel pan comes out by nature of being in a tropical region and whatnot. But I want to highlight kind of the birth story. And if you ever want to go really deep, there was a book called The Illustrated Story of Pan right here by Dr. Kim Johnson. And he really, it's about 20 years of artifacts and pictures and interviews that he goes all the way back to kind of tell this story, because it's not just history, it's really a story that that highlights culture and people and a narrative that you don't hear. So in short, you have in the 1880s, there was an English ordinance, and I'm going to just really, this is great because it goes, I'm going to start with really question number one. Well, I'll call it number one, but it was one of the first questions that came to me about the origins of, you know, around slavery and where did this instrument come from and where are we at today with it. For West African people, drumming is a way of life and has a very deep drumming and the spiritual practices that around drumming are really a guiding life force for several African nations and West African nations particularly. In the 1880s, there were several ordinances that were passed on the English colony of Trinidad and Tobago, where English settlers limited, they banned, limited, and then eventually banned West African expressions of drumming on the island. And so it started off with kind of curfews, and then you can only play at night, or then you can on the weekend, and then you can only play if there was a slave owner around and things like that. And eventually became all banned for several reasons. One, because of some of the intimidating nature of maybe the drumming, the rhythms, drumming brings people together. Didn't want people gathering and congregating, so they just had to cut all that out. So from the 1880s until the late 1940s, I would just say 1950 as a nice round number, you have about a 70-year period of development that birthed the banning of skin drums or djembes or congas or things of that nature, being that banned to the 70 years later to the creation of the modern steel pan. So what happened in those 70 years in between? How do we go from nothing to an entire family of instruments? So there's kind of a couple periods of development. First was the development and exploration of what's called Tambu Bamboo. Tambu comes from the French word tambour, which is drum, and bamboo is bamboo. So you kind of make it rhyme. Instead of saying timbre bamboo, say Tambu Bamboo. Just kind of a play on words. Anyway, Tambu Bamboo was using bamboo stalks in a series of stomping them on the ground and using, got a stick right here, using different type of gourds and sticks to stomp the stick and do counter rhythms with your other hand to have type of interlocking rhythms. So you have different interlocking and syncopated things just to try to imitate the rhythms of the drums on bamboo using a stick and marching with it. Now, if you know anything about bamboo, bamboo is not the most durable item. It's very, it's organic, so it's not permanent, but it is very sturdy. It's a very sturdy material, but over time, cracks, breaks. Thankfully, being in a tropical region, there's lots of bamboo, but just that became a headache getting more bamboo, and something that people didn't really want to stick with. So this is after about 20 years, the turn of the century, now we're in the 1900s, you now begin to see people substitute bamboo for more metallic or sturdy materials to replicate the percussion instruments. So some of those things were recycled car parts, scrap bins, things of that nature. So, for example, I have some. Right here is a brake drum from a Volkswagen slug bug. Why a slug bug? I don't know. Just this is the one I got, and this is what it is. And I have several from trucks and SUVs and stuff. But you get this metallic type of sound. All right. And so again, as a substitute, this is an instrument that one layer of sound, one layer of rhythm. On top of that, you might still have some of your classic instruments like a cowbell. This is a synthetic plastic one, but still. Right? Now, so you have all these handheld things because, and I don't want to digress too much, but a lot of these instruments were handheld or mobile because one of the main celebrations that promoted the development of music and kept pushing the creativity was the annual celebration of Carnival in Trinidad. Trinidad has one of the foremost carnival celebrations in the world. Carnival is revolves around the Catholic tradition of Lent and in the church, where just as it's to symbolize Jesus Christ and the early Israelites, well, before Jesus, the early Israelites being lost in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. You have being lost in the wilderness before in the Old Testament. And then you have Jesus Christ being lost for 40 days before he saw the burning bush and got the word of God to come to him. So just before that 40 days that are celebrated in the Catholic Church of giving yourself, realigning yourself back to your faith. Before you do that, the day before, you go back to the church and have that annual kind of realignment period in your life before Easter. the last day, the day before that, is the biggest party you can think of. So you can do anything you want before you kind of get back in line with your faith and get right with the Lord. You can have one day of really do whatever you want. It's the biggest party. Drink what you want, do what you want, indulge yourself. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, everything up and above, it's all up for grabs. And this goes back again to this is a French tradition. You might see the masquerade ball where people kind of cover their face and, oh, what's up, Drayden? We have where you can cover your face and you don't want people to see you and you don't want to know you don't want people to know who you are while you're doing what you're doing, but you still want to do what you want to do. So that's where the masquerade thing comes in. And now today, when you look at carnival celebrations, that whole feathers thing and feather mask has gone to elaborate forms with, some costumes 30, 40 feet high in the air. And there's this whole thing that it's pretty crazy. So, and there's a street party and a mobile, taking the music to the street is a big thing, culturally and with identity to reclaim the street. So anyway, you have mobile instruments. One instrument as well, step over here, because of Trinidad being an early exporter of steel pan, or it's not exporter of steel pan, exporter of oil in World War II, particularly Trinidad was fueling the Allied nations to get from the United States, and it was kind of like a big gas station out in the ocean to get to Europe and stuff. So you have some of the oil drums were just being discarded. This is I'm holding right here. This is an old 30-gallon oil drum. You might not think much of it as an instrument. However, this was the predecessor, the earliest form of what we know as the steel pan today. So just as people were experimenting with different metallic forms and metal instruments, this was another form, another resource that they use. Something sturdy, it's available, scrap, you can get it easy. And it was around the late 20s, early 30s when people began to notice that playing on top of an oil drum with sticks and just playing over time and making rhythms, that you can create two different tones on the surface of an oil drum. So for example, right here, this would be what one of the earliest steel pans sounded like. So yeah, that going with the metallic rhythms. And there's a video, I'm about to jump, let's see, I'm gonna share some resources later. There's a cool video that you can do, I'll show you our engine room, with kind of all this going on. But nonetheless, this was the earliest evolution. So that first mistake of saying, wow, you can put music, there's notes on top of this. Now, we haven't got quite to the point where it's like, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and that whole thing like that. But we have something that's producing musical notes. And that was a breakthrough. And from that led to so now we're in the 30s, going into the 40s into 1950 is our ending point, where we have about another 20 years of refining what this sound sounds like and creating more specific pitches. So now we go from one instrument that's just two random sounds. Now we go to a whole family of instruments and a whole steel band. So to jump back into one of the questions specifically was right here. Steel pan originally came from enslaved Africans back to the time of slavery was a common thing. So what was the role of a steel pan to freedom when all slaves were set free and every skin color races are the same, especially in African communities? So the push for this instrument came from one, trying to reclaim your musical identity that was banned from not being able to have any type of drumming. So being creative and resourceful. But once we had this original steel pan called the dudu, because it had two sounds, do 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 ding do 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 ding do So called the duda. Once we had that as a culture, there was a push to create an instrument that would have respect. And what I mean by that is an instrument that could be the same as respected or, upper bourgeoisie class citizens would play. Piano or violin was, again, very colonized Western European perspective. These were the instruments in the music of the day that had the most respect. So early pioneers of the steel pan wanted to recreate that and make sure they had an instrument that could match the musical capabilities that were most respected of the times. Now, again, I'm talking quality of instrument, not necessarily the genre of music being played, but quality of the instrument being respected. So that is what pushed the early pioneers like Elie Manet, Winston Spree Simon, these early guys, rest in peace, Dr. Manet, he passed away 3 years ago at the age of 85, I believe. Some of the earliest pioneers are just now transitioning on, and we're kind of in the second wave of steel pan in the world. So let me jump to some of these questions. Just as I said, the first one, steel pan music genres like calypso drew a lot of inspiration from Western classical. Why do you think that despite animosity towards Westerns showed to the creators of these styles, the style drew so heavily from those cultures? So why would the instrument reference Western culture, even though the Western culture banned the instrument? Why would you make it after Western culture? Again, it was a way to try to get on the same playing field, just as a people, as a citizen. That was the way to not only, again, bring back their own music, but then elevate and have something that you can present. So some of the earliest performances and most regarded in the 50s and 60s were musicians traveling to England, traveling around and playing classical music on the steel pan to show that, hey, this is something it's a new creation, but we want to play some music and we want to demonstrate we have an instrument that is worth being respected. Let's see. There was a question about, women and steel pan, and why was it considered dangerous for women? Two parts to that. And steel pan as number one was not the most favorable thing to be doing. If you were around steel pan in the 30s, the 20s, the 40s, all that time from, I guess that 70-year window, the 80s to the 1980 to 1950, you were in the bad part of town. You were hanging out with the wrong crowd. You were hanging out with the street fighters. It was not the good people. It wasn't a cool thing to do. So obviously with violence, there's a lot of hesitation for women to be involved because there's a lot of violent men. So that's where the apprehensions for women to be involved was just because of the violent nature of really the men and the street gangs that came with it. So women actually were involved before the 70s, but it's just some of the first like all female bands, and some of those groups became more notable in the 70s as well. So there's that one. Let's see. I'm gonna log back on so I can not be on the phone. Let's see. Did I miss a question in the chat by chance? I'm looking at, saw something pop up. Yes.
Daniel's question didn't make it onto the email today, so that's a brand new question.
Oh, okay. Okay, still popular. How did it go from? Right. So again, to kind of summarize from that point, how did it go from a low caste music to a variety of popular one? I think it's just awareness and exposure. Once there was an instrument that can play, again, that high upper mid class classical music, and then that lend, and when other non-African people, even in Trinidad, whether that's Indo-Trinidadian, Indian Trinidadian, or Europeans that were living in Trinidad, once they kind of had to socially accept it, then it became a little more popular along the way. So it wasn't something that was just automatically like, oh, this is great. Thank you for making a steel pan. Now we can all have fun. It had to kind of go through some proper channels, which is unfortunately some of the same processes of acceptance that we experience with cultures and multicultural things around even today. I mean, let's see. You look at cultural appropriation across different genres with food, with dancing, with clothing. You know, it's usually not cool when the actual creators of it and indigenous people do it, but it's oftentimes when it's accepted by mainstream, upper middle class, white America, then it's like, oh, it is cool, you know. That can even go down to my hair, you know, and hair is another topic in African community that's confidential, that's not confidential, controversial. So we still see that trend today in several indigenous and native art forms or expressions of art or creativity, where at first it may not be okay or not, it's not taken immediately until it's either commodified, commercialized, monetized, then it's okay. Even look at smoking weed in Washington State. It used to be illegal. Now that the state can make money, you can actually have a business and make millions. So even something like that. There's the same parallel we see with Western influence across the world. Okay, so let me jump into, I'm gonna just use a resource. I'm gonna go on I'm jumping in again on a second Zoom. I'm gonna mute this.
Oh, you're muted, Obi. Yeah, we can't.
I muted myself before I joined. I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna show you, we're gonna walk through, maybe just really quickly, you may have seen something similar to this with your readings, but I just wanna now jump into the pan a little bit more. So again, the steel pan is a family of instruments. Family meaning a collection, join without, okay, family meaning a collection of instruments. And this collection of instruments is designed to replicate the sonic, the auditory or the sonic ability of really a string orchestra or a piano, an 88 key piano. And now this, I'm just speaking to the physics and the math around sound. So in steel pan, we have an entire family of instruments, starting with the soprano pan or the tenor pan. Why is it called the tenor pan? Even though it's a soprano voice, that's just kind of a name that's stuck with it and it hasn't really changed. It used to be in the soprano or the tenor voice originally. The first model was created and then it just stayed there. I've heard also other theories that men used to play primarily, as we discussed before, and men are in the tenor and just kind of stuck with being a male bravado type of thing as well. Okay, so I want to do share screen. Don't mess up on this, please, Macbook Pro. And just walk through the steel pan voices, play a little bit, show you some videos, questions, we're out of here. Okay. Right. Share. As that's pulling up, I want to go to make sure to another question. My computer does not like Zoom today, like to the max. I feel you, students. I used to get on people. I had a couple students. I haven't been teaching as much, but now I have a little more sympathy for y'all. Okay. Am I live on the screen share?
It's working on it, but it hasn't, we can't see it yet. Did you click on a specific, like an app, like your?
Oh, share from here. Okay. And then right here, tab 1. Okay. The basics of the Steel Pan family. This is a Pan magazine. This is ran by a guy named Ted Gosselin out in Southern California. He kind of started just an online platform, kind of an online magazine about for steel pan stuff. So if you're ever curious in a deeper way to kind of know what's happening and what is what with steel pan, check out Pan magazine.
Your screen stopped sharing, so can you try and click through the share screen button one more time if you still want us to see your screen?
I just want this one website and it'll be great. I will be a good person for the rest of the day.
Or if you want to share the URL in the chat, maybe I could share it since I'm the host, and that might be better.
Okay. I'm just going to abandon. I'm not going to go on Zoom on this anymore. I thought it was restarting. I'm just going to abandon that all the way. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk about the instruments. Let's walk over here. Okay. I have some steel pans here. I set up a few. This one right here is the tenor pan or the soprano pan. In the United States, we call this the lead pan. It gets that name because it often plays the lead melody, which is it's the highest voice, and in most orchestrations, the soprano voice is singing the main melody. So it leads the band by playing the lead. It's not because the leaders of the group are playing. Here we go. I'm gonna do a quick. Set this here. Am I still on? I just see my finger.
Yep, we see you great.
I can just see my finger frozen.
That's working.
Okay. Stop video, start video. Okay, cool. Steel pan, soprano pan, demonstration. Soprano pan is set up in the circle of fifths. If you studied music, you may be referenced that as a learning tool because it's a round instrument. That was just what has become standardized as the range or the layout of the instrument. So if you go to the right, all the notes go up a fifth. If you go to the left, all the notes go up a fourth. So that's why it's called the circle of fourths and fifths. I have some of the notes written on there really closely, if you can see. And this is the highest sounding instrument in the steel pan family. All right, so tenor pan, the highest voice. Now I also have over here the double seconds, which is my favorite steel pan. The double second instrument. The double seconds was the name for it, kind of as a 2 words. A lot of these words for steel pans, they just kind of come based off of they're kind of created just based off of what the instrument does. So it's double because there's 2. And it's second because it's typically second to the lead pan in terms of harmonic and what it does in terms of orchestration. So the double seconds is slightly lower, where this is the lowest note right here. Or this is the lowest note on the tenor pan, but I can go much lower. So this one's set up in whole tones. So you have 1 set of 6 notes over here, 6, which is half of the 12 notes in Western music. And then you have that double and moved up a half step. And you have the other 6 over here. So you have a pattern. You have another pattern over here. The same principles apply to any other music instrument. Oftentimes people ask me, how do you practice? What do you do? How do you, what's the step? Is this a magic trick? The same principles apply. I think the learning curve is a little different than a wind instrument, especially because you can have instant success. I can give any one of you my sticks right here. You can come over to my instrument, hit it, and sound just like me. We can sound the same. There's no learning curve in terms of producing a sound like an instrument. But you still have to learn all the notes. When you're young, I would write the notes in for you, and you would just really, in the steel band and the pan yard, there's a lot of written, a lot of watching and just following by memorization. It's not a lot of, there's no sheet music, virtually no sheet music in a steel pan ensemble. It's all just watching and learning. Maybe I'll play something. All right. So here, those are the few of the instruments. Let me turn my camera back. Those are a couple of instruments of what they sound like. I'm really disappointed in myself that my Zoom is not working properly, because I had several videos to demonstrate all the other ones that I want to share, because
Obi, if
to
you
really give a flavor of what everything is for the steel band. I really want to make that up to you for the class because I really want you to have that knowledge and that experience. So maybe I could pass that on. I want to jump back into some of the questions around kind of where the instrument, or just some of the class questions, because you all had some insightful things that I want to wrap up with. Someone said, knowing the new styles of pans, things like the hang drum, the rap drum, I noticed they seem to be geared heavily towards a more spiritual, relaxing, low energy sound, when in contrast, the sound of the steel pan is loud and energetic. Why do you think the idea of steel panning and the enslaved African drumming styles became intertwined with spirituality? Well, I think they're intertwined with spirituality again because the drumming is a lifestyle. It is where it is such a rooted part of where when you look at the spiritualities of the Orisha and Santeria and those African religious practices, drumming is the religious experience. And just rhythmic drumming, I'm not talking about with like harmony or anything like that. So the rhythmic drumming is the religious experience. Some of those other drums like the hang drum and things, I think that's just kind of how they're being used. You know, they're used to be, you know, and more they're just used in a meditative setting. They're just used in a spiritual, I'm going to do a sound bath and just relax. Sure, you can take it to a heavy metal concert too if you want. Check out Tracy Thornton. He has a whole thing where he does 60s and 70s rock and what do you call it? Metal music covers on steel pan. He takes his steel pan and plugs it up to guitar amps and things and makes it sound like a guitar and does heavy rock metal cover. So you can take it wherever you want to go with it. So it's not just necessarily tied to that. How is steel pan music modernized in ways to improve and fit with modern music nowadays? I don't think the instrument, like I said, it's created with the same 12 chromatic tones of any instrument. So I can literally walk my steel pan. I can show up at a country western gig. I can play Jewish klezmer music, which I've done. I can play at a bar mitzvah and do that, which I've done. I can play violin concertos, which I've done. You can show up with any place, so you're not limited and bound to anything with this instrument. It's really down to your creativity. In terms of modernizing, yeah, there's little tweaks where some people have done more electrical adaptations. There's an electrical steel pan that you can kind of program the tones, but it looks like a steel pan. There's things like that that I've tried to match other instruments as well. What kind of instruments would sound best together with a steel pan? It could be something more lower pitched or higher pitched. Again, that's your creativity. There are people pushing the boundaries every day with banjos. I personally like the harp is one of my favorites to hear the steel pan with. That's just a personal favorite, but you can collaborate in any way. And that's kind of where this is wide open as a field. It's the only instrument created in the 20th century, the only family of instruments. This is one of the newest creations to the world. If you have an idea or want to use it in your own musical compositions or want to get more involved, it's really wide open. Someone asked about the materials and the sticks and the rubber. Does it absorb the vibration? There's kind of different thoughts about that. Some, like I said, my sticks. I personally like to play with ones that are more the tubing style. So this was like a rubber tube and you put a piece on the end. But the concept is pretty simple. You have some type of stick, whether these are carbon fiber. I have some bamboo ones. I have metal ones. I have wood ones. I have all kinds of stuff. And then some type of tubing, which is some thickness of rubber of some sort. You can see the different thicknesses. And then you can either use the tubing. Some people like to use the wraps and then kind of hand wrap it themselves. Just kind of depends. Another question is, what aspects of early steel pan drumming made it to be considered dangerous? Oh, we talked about that. That was just the violent nature of the pan really being part of the street gangs. Like organized gangs created steel pan. Like street fighting, I'm looking for trouble. I will whoop your ass in the street. Don't come and talk to me because I'm repping my people. And these clashes I'll speak on this. You might, when you look at instruments, you'll see what's called panorama. Panorama is the national steel band competition in Trinidad. The bands that represent panorama, some of the, well, not all of them today, but some of the most earliest bands from the first panorama were literal gangs that showed up to play music in an organized competition. The competition was founded as a way by the Prime Minister, Eric Williams, to try to decrease gang violence and say, okay, gangs, you like steel pan, that's what it is. And instead of fighting about who has the best music, because bands would show up, play, and if I didn't like you, I would take something like this right here, this 10-pound brake drum, and throw it and bust your head with it. So it's very violent with the music. And there's tons of stories about bands clashing and street fights that break out. I've had instructors and mentors in my life that have scars on top of their head from being struck and fought. So it can get very bad. But that organized, those bands came out of gangs. And so instead of actual physical violence, it's now musical violence, I guess you could say. And there's songs about that, musical war and gonna bust you up with my music and things like that. So the street gangs were made of violence, but now it's turned into a more music. And yeah, there's still violence and stuff. I don't want to say there's no violence or it's all gone, but violence comes with any urban area just by the nature of humanity. What made me start to play? I started playing steel pan because I learned from my father. He's born and raised in Trinidad as a professional musician himself. And when he came to Washington State for love and to be with my mom, I had a family. He raised myself. I'm the oldest of four. He raised me and my brothers up to all kind of learn steel pan. And I just took it on myself to continue playing and study music through college and continue playing it myself. My personal favorite is the double seconds, which I showed you, but really if I was in a big band, what I would actually like to be playing is the quadraphonic, which is my only because of where you're positioned in the band. The quadraphonics are kind of right next to the drum rhythm section, but you're right in the middle. So you get a little bit of everything. And when you're around 120 or 130 people jamming, that's my favorite spot to be. I played in panoramas in Trinidad. I teach and work with a band in St. Lucia. I performed in New York as well. I think you've also read, this is a side note, you read about Vance Humphrey in some of your readings. That's actually one of my close friends. We met in St. Lucia in Trinidad, or in St. Lucia, and performed in New York and St. Lucia together. Cool story about him. He went to Trinidad to play in Carnival, play with the band in 2020. And because of COVID, he couldn't leave the island. He's been stuck in Trinidad playing steel pan since 2020, January, and living his best life. Now he's one of the main members of one of the top 3 steel bands in the world and living his best life on steel pan because of COVID. So shout out to Vance. Are there artists in the US that use steel pan? Yes. I would check out people like Jonathan Scales, like music scale. Jonathan Scales, he does very avant-garde kind of funk trio that he has drums, bass, guitar, and steel pan. Real badass. I would look up people like Andy Akio, AKIHO. He's another modern music guy. He writes for symphonies and percussion ensembles. Even on Pan Magazine, they have an article of like the 10 most top albums and tracks of the decade that are the last couple of years that use steel pan. Check it out. You got to search for it, but again, people do use it. It is there. And I just want to promote it as a resource. If you get nothing else from me today, know that it is a musical instrument that can do anything. It's not limited to beach music and just playing folk tunes from the Caribbean on a beach with a Mai Tai in your hand and an umbrella on your drink. It's not from Jamaica. It's not from Hawaii. It's from Trinidad and Tobago. If you walk away with that, you'll be good. I feel like I'm rushing because I'm trying to buy back some time. I'm looking at the clock. Can I maybe borrow 5 more minutes from people? Is that okay? There's more to ask. If you have to go, I don't want to hold you. I respect your time. But I want to run through some questions and maybe ask one or two of you. So let's see. Looking at why is it shaped? Why is the instrument shaped in a pan? Again, what promoted the instrument to be round again was this oil drum. The surface of it being flat, the incidental indentation of it from playing is what sparked people to say, how far can we stretch the metal and elongate the playing surface? The round shape is actually stretching the metal and elongating the playing surface, so you have more room to work with to create notes. So that's where that round bowl shape comes from. Even on a tenor pan, for example, this in some cases, like a side profile, I mean, this is over 9 inches of stretching the metal from the flat side being over here, and this was pushed all the way down to create a round bowl. This is over 9 inches. So the center part right here is very thin, very sensitive. Some of the most tragic things, I don't cry very much, but I've seen this fall onto the ground and crack, and I almost shed a tear. Thankfully, it wasn't my drum, but I've seen it happen. It's a very sad day. Let's see. I think that's everybody's questions. I feel like this was on a whirlwind trying to make up some time. But please, ask me some questions. I would love to follow up or be as relevant as I can.
Obe, can you hear us? Can you hear us talking?
What's that?
Can you hear us now? Can you hear me?
Talk. Not really, but I'm gonna make it work.
We'll just put stuff in the chat. Can you read the chat?
Oh, the chat.
So there's one question about whether or not the sticks need to be hollow. If you read.
Oh, no, they don't. I've experimented all kinds of sticks all over the years. Hollow just kind of maybe has a different texture of feel, makes it a little lighter, depending on the material. It's all personal preference. And I've changed my sticks, and I've changed as my playing has evolved as well. So the more kind of comfortable I've gotten, I've tried longer, I've tried shorter, tried again, hollow with holes drilled in it. It really is just a personal preference on you learning your instrument over time. Another aspect about this we didn't talk about as much as the tuning and the maintenance. All of this is hand done. I've had these instruments, these ones I've demonstrated since the early 90s. They've been in my possession. The metal over time, decades of playing, you see changes in your instrument over time. I guess in a shorter scale, it's kind of like having a pair of shoes. It feels like when you get them new, they're one way, and then after you kind of wear them for one way, maybe you weren't tying them tight because they felt one way, but then after a while, you feel like you got to tie them a little tighter because they feel different. Things like that. Let's see. Some Under the Sea vibes. Definitely Under the Sea. I hate to play Under the Sea. Well, I have a love-hate relationship with Under the Sea. For one, I hate to kind of keep the instrument in a box, just because it's a novelty instrument. But I will say, Under the Sea has made me the most money, more than any other song that I've ever played in my life. So shout out to Under the Sea on the steel pan. Let's see. Does it create a different sound? But you, again, with the sticks too, there's a lot of experimentation. Again, Andy Akio, he's Japanese. He has some music where he actually writes for these chopsticks to play on the pan. and for a different kind of sound and texture. Um, the earliest, before the rubber tubing, the tubing was actually bicycle tubes that people would steal and then steal your tire just to get the tube to make a stick and play in pan. So again, it was the gang guys. So, you know, they don't mind stealing your bike because they don't care. Let's see, looking at the chat. Why do I like steel pan? Again, it kind of started for something to me. It was just something that was just around and I just did. It was kind of a way of life. My dad just like, I use the analogy like the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, dad, Joe Jackson. And, you know, Joe Jackson kind of made Michael was like the youngest brother and had to make all his brothers. The Jackson 5 was the 5 brothers that used to practice and their dad used to make them and take them on gigs and stuff. It was kind of like that for a little bit with me and my brothers. We had to do it. And then I kind of evolved and began to find my own motivations and my own inspirations. It wasn't just, oh, my dad is telling me. It's like, oh, I actually want to get better. I actually want to learn more about music and harmony. I actually want to study theory and chord progression. I want to try to model other music styles that I've never heard. And I want to play them on steel pan because I think it sounds better than playing it on my trumpet. And so my own explorations just kind of kept my creativity going. Let's see. Come on. Any other thoughts, Dr. Bole? Where should we go at this point?
I think we've got a ton of information to work on. I know I took excellent notes. If you could maybe share the URLs with me and maybe just a sentence of what to look for on each of those recordings that you couldn't play for us today, I can put that in our discussion for them to be able to listen to on their
own.
Okay.
So something to share for later for Canvas or something like that. Okay, for sure. Yeah. I do want you to get that, and I apologize.
That's okay. Hey, this was great. This was wonderful. Class, thank you so much. Can we all either give like a physical round of applause or hit the react button and thank Obi for being here and sharing with us? I thought that was excellent. I'm glad it all worked. So if there are any questions at this point, you can stick them in the chat, even if it's just for me. Otherwise, look for the quiz and the discussion post being dropped tonight, and those will be due by Friday at midnight. So you have the rest of the week to work on them. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Obi, so much for being here. We'd love to get you back with our next class. I think in the spring, we're gonna have another class. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you again, Obi.